Hi, my name is Juanita Reed. I started working at JBC in 1970 and I left in 1979.
My name is Patrick Smichael. JBC was my first job out of high school. I remember the exact date. It was the 4th of December 1968.
My name is Velma Orr. I'm married to this lovely gentleman for 30 years. I started at JBC in 1973, March.
I'm Laurie Stewart, a member of the team that started up JBC Television way back in 1963.
Hi, this is Winston Barnes. I'm currently the news director at WAVS Radio in South Florida. I went to JBC initially in December of 1968.
My name is Kay Spence. I don't know if anybody remembers me, but I worked at RJR for 5 years, and when JBC Television opened up, I went to work with Roy Lawrence.
My name is Eric Douglas. I joined JBC, I think it was in November 1964, and I started out as a boom operator.
I'm Garth Rhodes. I'm former general manager of JBC.
My name is Easton Lee.
And I went to the JBC in December of that year as trainee cameraman, soundman. I worked on Crew C. Winston Gibbs was the leader for Crew C. Crew C was cool, and the great thing about that is that you worked on shift. One week you worked at a particular time, the next week you worked at a different time. There were times when we did television news, and then we'd stay around to record the 10-something news, I think. We did some production work as well. We do Caymanas Park races. I think my crew went to Caymanas Park once a month. And I had a camera that was on top of what I now found out was the kitchen at Caymanas Park. And I'd take the race from the last corner down to the finish line. I don't know, the guys, I was really new, and the guys thought I'd get excited or nervous. You're doing your job. You bring it to the end of the race. And when you get to the finish line, you'd stop the pan and just hold it on the finish line, and the horses would run by.
I started at JBC on February 20, 1972. I started as an accounting clerk, and then I left as the accountant in 1986.
When television opened, I went to work with Jackie Hendricks as his secretary. And I worked in television for years. And they transferred me to programs. And my boss was Noel Gale.
I was doing amateur theater in Jamaica, as you know. And there was a lady called Cecily Waite Smith. She was a teacher at Excelsior High School at the time. And she wrote plays and all like that. And she had me in a play that she wrote and produced. I can't remember the title now, you know. Anyway, and she knew of my activities. And when JBC was to go on the air, the Canadian general manager asked her to help him to locate suitable Jamaicans for announcers on the air. And she called me the day and she said, "Come, I want you to do an audition." And I went. And she said, "Boy, but I shouldn't bother audition you." So I laughed, I joked. Then she said, "But please to come next week, Friday," and so on. The general manager appointed for JBC was there. After 5 minutes of the audition, he said, "You are hired." And I was sent to the BBC course after that. This was in December of 1961, because you remember the station opened in 62. And by that time, nobody else had been appointed, not even Adrian, the chief announcer, who was then working at Radio Jamaica. But then after I went, I came back to hear that Adrian was appointed, and then after that, other people.
I remember one of the very first programs that I worked on was one with Jamaica folk singers. Easton Lee was sitting by my side at the console, the director's console at the time, helping me because, sorry, he had some connection with the Jamaica folk singers. I think he was on some artistic role he played with the folk singers. So while I was there directing it, he was sitting beside me, telling me what is going on, what is coming. Although we had done the rehearsal, but with his familiarity with the subject matter, it was very useful to have him there. Maxine Trotter, I think, was also by my side as the production assistant at the time.
My experience as a worker before broadcasting was important in my success in broadcasting. I worked with the Jamaica Social Welfare Commission, and I was in and out of every little village and corner of Jamaica doing social development, and succeeding Louise Bennett, the Honorable Louise Bennett, as the drama officer at Social Development Commission, and teaching the people how to put on their plays.
And I was interviewed by Hector Bernard, who was then, I think his title was Assistant General Manager in charge of news, sports, and current affairs. And I distinctly remember him making fun of my magazine article. I remember him saying to Council Waters, we have another magazine article person here. But I got the job. I got the job. The salary was £8, 2 and 6. We went to Mrs. Walker's window every Friday and signed to collect. And this was the basic civil servant salary, which is how they computed it.
JBC was one of the best, or is the best place I've ever worked. I worked with the sheriff's office for 23 years, and you can't wait to leave at 5. You remember at JBC we stay over after 5 o'clock. I play dominoes, go to football game. And by the way, I used to be the manager for JBC football team.
JBC had a football team, which consisted both of JBC staffers and of people who used to just hang around JBC. So Monty Scott, who was the national captain of the Jamaica football team, played with the JBC team. And we used to go on these excursions to Boxside companies or to visit other major companies in the rural areas. We'd play cricket matches, we'd play football matches. Hugh was in fact the captain of the football team. We had people like Ali McNabb, who was an athlete in his own right. I mean, McNabb played both cricket and football and was quite a runner himself, was on that team. So we were, in fact, I think one year JBC actually fielded that team in the business league.
JBC, it's a university in itself. It's like, it was just such a, it was such a blessing to work there. I met so many people. We were like a big family there. Everything was just perfect. Just perfect. We did good, yes.
First major responsibility I was given was the weather. Those days, and this is pre-digital anything, we got the weather from what was then the Palisados International Airport, since renamed the Norman Mann International Airport. And how the weather was done, that for radio, you actually called the Met Office and somebody would read the weather to you and you typed it up, and that's what we use in our main radio news bulletins at 12:30 and at 5:30. And then for television at night, you actually had somebody from the Met Office drive to JBC to do the weather on television.
I was there with all the boys that come and go, including you, Lukey, with Desmond Elliott and the rest. So those were my best days. I went to the Cannes Film Festival twice, representing JVC, because I was in charge of buying the films and programming the station.
Anyway, it was 4 of us from that complex, 3 from JBC, 1 from Jazz. Myself, Julius McCullough, who worked in television at the time as a director, and Alfonso Walker. We spent 6 months in training at the BBC Television Training School at Shepherd's Bush in London, and then 3 months on attachments, depending on what your area of interest was. In fact, one of the interesting things, that is where Alfonso Walker developed the concept of where it's at. Because instead of an exam at the end of your course, you had to do a production. And Alfonso's production was a light entertainment show, which he named Where It's At. This is where It's At actually started.
The one thing that the statement that I want to make, though, is that the training and the experience any one of us got at the JBC is just absolutely priceless. There are people who made a number of things possible for me. Yeah, there are people, there are detractors, but it comes with the game. There are people like Ed Wallace, who called me back from New York. People like Bev Mandy, who initially saw something that I didn't know existed. Tony Scott was a good buddy of Jeff's, and his family knew my father well. Erica Allen, who was one of my coaches and mentors. So many people. Bernie Chin, who gave me my first job as a TV cameraman. JBC was a family. I mean, there are people that I was working with during the week, and I'd end up hanging out with them on the weekend. And a lot of people cannot say they enjoyed that kind of benefit and relationship with people. Those are the kinds of things that made JBC special.
They bred JBC people, whether in news or engineering or production. There was a JBC culture, a real culture, and it was valuable, and it was flawed in places, but it was a culture that served Jamaica well.
You pass the skills on. Right? It was another thing. People are always looking to make the next person better. So people like Claude Robinson, who later became a professor at the university, people like Joe Lewis, Bas Freckerton, who was in charge of sports, they were always looking to make you better.
JBC was more creative. JBC was more adventurous. They'd take chances that RJR would never, ever contemplate.
Radio played the pioneering role in the development of Jamaican music. And I'm talking about JBC Radio, not RJR, because RJR came to the table very late in that process.
School Challenge Quiz came out of a conversation that the then chairman, Ivan Levy, had with my late wife, Hope. She had a cocktail party at his house, complaining that there was not enough educational stuff on JBC television. And he's saying, well, what sort of thing? And she said, well, like University Challenge. Well, he says, can you do it? And without really spending too much time thinking about it, she said, yeah, I think so. And Bernie Chin was the first director. He was responsible for getting the set organized. And if I remember rightly, Rupert Bent did the electronics for the push button bits, and on we went.
It was an initiative of Gloria Lanneman to start a morning show, So right after that, people like Don Buckner, Tina Barovia, myself, Gloria Lanneman, Newton James, others put together the morning show. I think the first host, if I'm not mistaken, was Jonah Forbes, along with Linda De La Pena. And that just caught on like wildfire. And of course, the rest is history. It still exists today on TVJ.
And when we heard our own people, and remember now that was important. You had Lou and Rani, you had Charlie Hyatt, you had Maud Fuller. And when you had that kind of broadcast, because remember now, they didn't hear anything of their language on TV, it was forbidden to speak patois.
It is very important that you have a voice, and the voice had to have pictures on it in the 60s. So being able to see yourself and the world in your front room was, of course, a real step forward. You felt you were in the game, you could see what was happening. And the modest programs that went down, they got tremendous following. Miss Lou's program, they had tremendous following.
Goes on. Coming up on 2, standing by. Cue them.
My understanding in doing research since I left the place is that the vision that the government had when JBC was set up is that it was to have become the BBC. It was to have become a non-partisan, independent output for Jamaican culture. And we could argue about whether or not it actually achieved that and in the full sum of the way that Norman Marley envisioned it. But its impact on Jamaica culture goes without saying.
JBC was a phenomenal entity. JBC was a core, not just of broadcasting and entertainment in Jamaica, but culture, because it was especially television and radio, of course, the platform to showcase Jamaica's culture.
Jamaican people thought they were now worth something, right? So it was that kind of thing, man.
I don't think any other single institution had that kind of impact on Jamaican life and Jamaican culture. Anything that was not a money-making venture, because JBC was not a money-making venture. It never did make money, which is probably what led to its demise in the long run. But I look back on the years I spent there initially and the subsequent assignments I did for them, that it helped to form me. Along with Kingston College, these are the two institutions that helped to form me as a human being.